Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here with Brother Bro. It's time to review Dune, the long-anticipated fantasy epic from Denis Villeneuve.
Fantasy.
Yeah!
Fantasy. I guess yeah.
How is it not a fantasy movie, you fucking weirdo? They made up a spice. They made up a planet.
What's the difference between fantasy and sci-fi?
Tell me what the fuck Stellan Skarsgård was.
Okay,
Star Wars.
Here's
Lord
the
of the
difference.
Rings.
Here's the difference between fantasy and sci-fi. A sci-fi is a world that could be ours. A fantasy is a world that could not be ours.
Okay, and
You just made me
Stellan
think.
Skarsgård floats around.
Yeah, he does.
What do you want? It's a
That's
sci-fi
the
fantasy
That's
movie.
why it's a fantasy movie. I also think, the best way to describe this for me would be adventure epic. If you're like, I know I'm gonna like this, you're gonna fucking eat it up. This is in every way a classic hero's journey tale.
This is a kind of movie that a studio gifts us once in a blue moon, too. Especially now when original movies are hard to come by.
Yeah, the problem is a lot of the movies that are made that are kind of like this, I check out because they just feel like they are pandering. They feel like they have to meet the expectations the audience wants for it, like all the action. This film's interesting because it meets all of the expectations that you'd want for it, but it feels more purposeful. It has a slower pace that I really enjoyed, and it lets you just get a little bit more immersed in the world. It takes its time, and it feels very well thought out, like so detailed, from like the production design and the very precise cinematography.
I felt like I was watching a different kind of epic because nobody paces a film like Villeneuve. The studio allowed him to move forward like with his kind of methodical, thoughtful pace.
It felt like a Villeneuve film.
It felt intensely like storyboarded, and all the technical elements are just top fucking notch.
Yeah, I was like, Marvel needs to take notes. It didn't need to have any sky portals. The worms were enough. Any scene with the fucking worm in it was insane.
Those were the biggest
Exhilarating.
things I've ever seen.
That's like the thing with Dune is it's fun because it's just so big, and
Yeah.
then you get the worms in the big film. This thing is big, guys. Let me tell you, the worm, big.
A few years from now, you're gonna open your thesaurus on Big, and it's just gonna be the worms from Dune. For me, this movie completely lived up in terms of the spectacle, in terms of being like an epic and having enough satisfying action scenes. The first half does a lot of like explaining and world building. The second half does offer all the action you want. It really felt like a full meal just in terms of the thrills that I got from this.
It feels like the kind of movie that could be slow enough and could take its time with the story, and is also the first chapter in a 2-part series that maybe it doesn't go for all the action by the end. I was wondering, like, at some points, if this would be more of an action movie, and it actually does give you that, but it gives you in the right amount, in the right proportion, I would say. So that you're like, oh yes, like thank you, I wanted this, I'm ready for this now. I've taken my break and I'm ready to go again.
And also what I love about it is the action is not just like, oh, the end is just going to be like as many people dying as possible. Even in like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, not a criticism against it, but just like the idea that the most epic scene is like the highest death toll and just like a bunch of things are happening.
Yeah.
But Villeneuve is always concerned with giving you like this feeling of grandeur, the sand shaking underneath these people's feet, the rumbling, like a good wide shot. There are so many other ways that Villeneuve understands how to give you that feeling of an epic spectacle without just like, all the combat. You get combat.
Yeah, or just like what a wide shot does, or what a helicopter shot of a new place does.
Villeneuve is clearly like at this point just a master of his craft, and just visually and sonically like everything is as heightened as it could possibly be, especially sonically. Like, he is not a director who's afraid to rely on the score and the sound design to help enhance that feeling.
And rely on the score, this movie does. In most scenes, I could tune into the music and think about like, oh, that's doing a lot for this scene. I feel like this film owes a massive debt to Hans Zimmer, and I don't know what the movie would be without the score, because at every moment when you're feeling that exhilaration and excitement, the score is right there with you. I could think of maybe one moment when the sound took over instead of the score. It's just like rattling you, and it's trying to do so the whole time. The impact of that, I think, is hard to understand. It's kind of like how John Williams has this massive impact on films like E.T. and Jaws, where you wouldn't know how you'd be taken through that story without the music. That is the case here. Hans Zimmer does use like motifs and theming a little bit, but it's all about the different kinds of sounds that he's blending in here. His range and his dynamicism is phenomenal.
I think he has broadened his toolkit over the years too. Like, he's not just relying on an orchestra. He's using like these crazy vocals. He's using synthesizers.
He does
all
whatever
kinds of
the
sound
fuck.
design.
It's a complete grab bag. Like, there's a bagpipe in here. There's bagpipes.
I didn't even notice a lot of the score actually, because a lot of the times it blended in with the sound design.
Yes.
And I need to listen to the score on its own too.
I actually had a harder time picking out the sound because there was so much score. You know, it's such a big part of the mixing in this movie is like how the score is blending into the scenes. I really like the cinematography overall in this film, a little bit more than I thought I would. Yeah, it's not so colorful, but it did feel like purposeful in doing that. And it had a very distinct vision for what the planet would look and feel like.
The home planet looks like pretty gray, and the planet of Arrakis is kind of dominated by this golden sand colored hue. And yeah, it's not like Blade Runner 2049 or even Arrival in terms of like how colorful it is. And even on the trailer, I was kind of like, is this too like desaturated and muted? But I did think it was its own kind of immersive. But when you watch it on the big screen, you do realize like how detailed the images are and the lighting really is. And also the planets have like a sort of ancient feel to them. They're not really dominated by like all these different lights and technology.
Yeah, and you kind of get why everything's made out of rocks, because the sandworms would fucking eat it if it wasn't.
Yeah, so it like made sense that they didn't try to make it like the most colorful movie. Like everything on the sand planet is sandy and the other planet is just kind of like empty and rockish. So it just made sense. It was good world building.
But I wanted to tie that back to the score because there's a minimalistic color palette and visual style to this film. And then the score, on the other hand, is like maximalist. So that's where I thought like the score complemented the visuals.
Everything that happened at nighttime looked like really cool. Like the sandworm scene at nighttime.
They're just kind of dimmer.
I know, but like there was something fucking cool about it.
I really agree with the statement that it feels like you're back at the movies when you're watching it. Like it feels really good to be in front of the big screen and enjoying this massive thing that wants you to just like sit there for 2.5 hours and just soak it in. And I did feel like I got lost in the story, despite it being slower paced.
And it's absolutely worth shelling out a few extra bucks for IMAX. I'm not someone who does that all the time, but like for this one,
even if you're fucking poor, do it.
Break open the piggy bank, take it from your kids' college fund.
But I won't say that I feel like I'm completely over the moon about this overall. I didn't think Dune was ever going to be the kind of movie that I would love. Star Wars is like not my complete thing. I don't get extremely invested in like that epic adventure fantasy sci-fi thing. So I think the movie did like as good of a job as it could have. And if you think you're gonna love this from the source material and you think you're the kind of person who will, you'll be fucking happy. I care the most about story and character. This story wasn't really anything I haven't seen before. Like it was a reiteration of the hero's journey, and it was pretty straightforward in that regard. I don't think too many of the characters were memorable. Like you come to like them and you like understand their personalities. But I think the characters were just a little bit flat. I wasn't that surprised by anything in the story. I do think it has some really interesting themes about like imperialism and colonialism that I would love to see fleshed out further in the second half.
It was pretty basic.
Yeah, it was pretty basic. He's trying to find out his destiny, and you know, we don't know if he's the one. Maybe he's not the one. How will he discover whether he can like utilize the powers that have like been attempted to be bestowed upon him, and you know, is he like part of this like fate mission or not?
Yeah, the chosen one thing, I mean, we've seen it in a lot of movies, so it didn't feel new here, and there wasn't anything that I'm gonna leave the theater like thinking about or mulling over. The movie didn't have that much of like a heart. And I've heard some people say like, oh, the second half is where all the depth is. And it's like, okay, I hope so. I would more than love to see a second half, especially if it expands on the
ass
themes.
Will be in the theater if you give me the second half.
But this is a 2.5 hour movie that exists on its own, so we have to evaluate it on its own. If it doesn't deliver anything that's thought-provoking, then it doesn't deliver anything thought-provoking. Some people don't need that, and if you don't need that, then you'll just fucking love the movie. But for me, I'm also going to this as a fan of Denis Villleneuve, and every movie that he's done, I think, has been more thought-provoking than this. Villeneuve seemed to put more thought into like the story and the character development of some of his other films, and it just doesn't match the spectacle here. It's also like not interstellar-y in the way where it really tries so hard to be this thing, but it doesn't quite work as it. It tries to be the adventure epic and it succeeds. So it'll just kind of depend on the taste of the person going in if they crave something deeper or not. Awards talk time, let's get into it. So technicals, which one is it winning? clearly winning sound. There's not going to be a discussion about it. It's going to win sound.
Is there
and it's
anything
going to win
that could nip at its heels for?
Not even.
Okay.
And then visual effects is a no-brainer. It's happening. By the way, the visual effects were flawless. I didn't notice anything being computery.
The only scene was when they do that push in on Timothy Chalamet when his little visor helmet comes up.
I remember
that was the one scene where I thought about visual effects. Other than that, it felt very fucking real and tactile.
Yeah, all the huge spaceships and the architecture felt like that's just there. Like I can just go scrape that with my fingernails. It's so there.
Ew.
Gross, but it's true.
Why would you want to scrape it with your fingernails?
To absorb.
Why don't you just touch
texture.
It like this?
No. Those two, I don't care that it's fucking September. It's going to win those awards.
3 score.
I know, but we're getting to
what
that.
else is going to win score? You tell me.
Johnny Greenwood's having a good year.
Yes, he is. Hans Zimmer basically just said, I am the master, I am the god of film score with this movie. That's what he did.
And he hasn't
There's no other way around this.
The Lion King, and it's weird that considering the body of work he's done since The Lion King, that he hasn't had an Oscar to show for any of that. Give it to him.
He's got to have it for this movie.
Nobody's going to dispute it. So those 3 I think it can win. I also would probably predict it to win production design, and this is taking out French Dispatch. French Dispatch is incredible and detail oriented, but we also have given it to Budapest before, so we've seen that. But this film was just very immersive and detailed. I think that this can win production design too.
Yeah, I think it could win, but it is up against French Dispatch, which could be pretty strong.
And then costumes, I think it could be in contention for the win. We'll have to see if Cruella can be stronger.
I think Cruella would beat this for costumes.
That's what I probably predict.
You kind of get used to the costumes since there's a few outfits that they wear overall.
Cinematography, it will be nominated.
Editing, it will be nominated. Could it win editing because it's winning sound? The answer is yes, it could win editing.
Listen, editing
the answer.
Is going to matter if it gets Best Picture, I think.
That is false.
I think
completely false. Completely false. Nope. It's winning sound, Cole. It will get nominated for editing no matter what. It's winning sound no matter what. It doesn't need to get Best Picture to get nominated. Whether it wins editing, I agree, is a little bit depending on whether it gets nominated for Best Picture.
And will it get nominated for Best Picture? Look, I left this screening thinking, for most fans who are anticipating this, it lived up. And in many ways, this kind of movie that's just so well made across the board, you got the crafts. It seemed to me like this could get into Best Picture, and I wouldn't really mind it. And I do think that in terms of director, which would probably come along with it, I think that people could be very on board to celebrate Villeneuve's baby that he's created here and that we've all been waiting a long time for.
And the way that he's allowing all of us to return to the cinema.
However, I'm not actually sold that it gets nominated yet because it depends on whether or not people feel disappointed by it. Are people going to feel like they didn't get enough substance out of it, or are people just going to be like, I was totally fucking satisfied? And so far, the reactions have been both things.
I left thinking picture and director are definitely in the cards. I don't know how much people who aren't already at the bullseye in the target demographic are going to be captivated by it. Do there have to be a lot of fans in the Academy for this to get nominated? It definitely has that sprawling quality that a lot of Oscar bait used to have. It's also a part 1, and I actually had less of a problem with that than I thought I was going to, because both the Hunger Games movies that I saw, the first 2, I was really disappointed by the fact that they set up all this stuff that wasn't resolved. And while Dune, I expected to do it, and it did it on a level that it didn't bother me. It didn't just end right when I thought things were getting good. It felt like it completed a movie, and there was definitely more to explore. Also, when was the last time a tech sweeper didn't get nominated for Best Picture? That question alone might convince me that it's getting nominated for picture and director.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point. If it's going to win 3 or 4, then it would be tough to believe it wouldn't be in.
And also that it wouldn't just get nominated for director.
Yeah,
I could see people wanting to give him the award too if the front runner is a spotlighty kind of movie. I do think box office will matter a little bit, whether it's considered a success, whether they're gonna plan a sequel.
For my rating, I am going with an 8 out of 10 for Dune.
I will also 8 out of 10 Dune.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing.
What's the biggest worm you've seen?